I just always assumed that the Pluto and Scorpio generation had it the hardest and got the most screwed when it came to the other generations. And I say that because I am a Pluto and Scorpio and I experienced it firsthand. But I also say that because I'm into astrology and I know that Scorpio is a very intense placement to have, and it's very passionate and very transformative and very, very, very familiar with the cycles of death and rebirth. And that's hard. And so you get the package of Scorpio and you bundle it with Pluto, who's, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. So it's in its sign of rulership. It makes it more intense and more passionate and more transformative. And in fact, I thought it was so intense because if you look at all of the Pluto transits throughout the years, it's not in Scorpio for very long. I mean, Pluto can literally be in a constellation for decades. But when it comes to Scorpio, I think it was in there for something like 12 years. And I thought, how powerful must it be and how hard must it be if there was only souls that came in for 12 years that have this type of energy? And so I just always assumed that we had it the hardest. So recently I got into learning about my family tree and ancestry and just really learning about the roots and where I came from. And I tried this back in 2007. So if you have not done this recently, I invite you to do this because my grandfather was put into foster care when he was younger. And so we don't know a great deal about his family. And I tried to look it all up back in 2007, and there still wasn't that much information online. But I just went back this year and I was absolutely floored at how much information is online these days. I found pictures of my great-great-grandparents. I found all kinds of census information. They even have registration cards with your family's handwriting on it, which I thought was so neat to see that. And I couldn't believe all of the pictures. People's yearbooks are on there. Fascinating stuff. I went down a whole entire wormhole with that. But, I love astrology. So I started pulling my family members' natal charts and looking at the dynamics and figuring out who they were as a person and what their personality was like. And I started looking at synastry charts between my grandparents and my great-grandparents, and I started noticing little aspects that trickled through the generations. I thought that was so fascinating, just learning about the generational karma that comes through in your family. So anyways, I went down this whole entire wormhole, and I just had a grandmother that passed away, and one thing that I loved is how big her funeral was. I was not expecting that at all. And when we got there were so many people that had so many stories to share about her, which was just absolutely beautiful. But this whole experience has really drawn me into talking to the grandparents that I have left, talking to the family members that I have left, and hearing their stories and hearing who the people were on this family tree that I see, which is another fascinating thing. If any of your family members have already done the generational thing in the family tree, you can find those family trees online and they're already filled out. So a lot of my stuff was already filled out for me. I'm telling you, mic drop, could not believe all of this stuff that is online these days. Anyways, looking back and talking to people, I realized so much information about the other generations, and that, maybe Pluto and Scorpio didn't have it as bad as I thought. I looked back at the Pluto and Virgo generation and how they were a product of this Pluto and Leo generation. That was all about me in some ways. And, they showed off their wealth and they showed off what they had earned. And a product of that is you gain power by how much wealth you have. And so then that's a byproduct of your family. And so your wife had to look perfect and your children had to be perfect and you had to have a perfect home and everything had to be Leave It to Beaver. It had to all be perfect. And so this Pluto and Virgo generation when I really sat with their energy, I really thought about how it would feel to be a child and be in this impossible standard all around you. All around you, everybody is expecting you to be perfect. And even look at the religion at the time and how in America, I'm speaking from the US, in Christianity, you had to be perfect. You couldn't sin. You had to ask for forgiveness if you sinned. And, you had this whole environment that was critical and judged you if you weren't perfect. And everywhere you looked, everything was perfect. I even looked at the vintage ads that were going on during that time. And there's even things that were printed in the newspaper on how to be a perfect wife and how to, there was, I forgot what brand it was. It was some kind of brand, and it was talking about the girls that were chubby, like they had a plus size section, and it was like maybe a size 10 dress or something. I mean, it wasn't what in today's standards would be plus size, but those people were considered chubby. And the ads would just talk about how to be perfect wife and how to have the perfectly clean house and the perfectly mannered children. And of course, as we all know, children love to rebel, right? And so with this generation, we're talking late 50s, early 70s, you've got the children that rebelled, that listened to rock and roll even though their parents didn't want them to do that, and didn't go to church every Sunday even though their parents wanted them to do that. And children naturally rebel. That's what happens every generation. But you have this Virgo generation, Pluto and Virgo generation, and they go on, and we have the Pluto and Libra generation come on, and how they were failed by the previous generation is there was just standard of perfectionism that everyone needed to meet. And the Pluto and Libra generation, they didn't want to rock the boat. They just wanted to come here and do what they had to do and reach the point that they had to reach, and they want justice for all. Okay. They want everybody to have a fair chance. They want everything to be even playing fields. They don't want someone cheating to get ahead. They don't want manipulation going on. And what you find is these Pluto and Libras got in this job or career field, or even with their families, they had to start keeping secrets because maybe the company that looked perfect on the outside really wasn't so perfect on the inside. They took shortcuts, or they fudged their numbers on their reports, or, they had an accident, but they swept it under the rug. And the Pluto and Libra generation was being called to whistleblow these things and to transform it. But at the same time, they didn't want to rock the boat. And sit with that energy and think about how you would want to stand up with all your might and to be assertive and to blow the whistle. But if you did, that would mean that people might not like you. And you grew up in this generation that you kind of people pleased in order to be liked, because in all of these generations I'm talking about so far, children were to be seen and not heard. So you didn't have a voice as a child. You were never allowed to really have a voice, this generation. And I'm talking very broad in this video about each generation. So there's outliers and there's people that's not going to fit this mode. But overall, the Pluto and Libra generation came here and they wanted to stand up for what they believed in. And they didn't think with the companies, the shortcuts they were taking or the number fudging or the rules that they were breaking was right. But yet they didn't know how to stand up and still protect their family. Maybe they would lose their job if they spoke up. And then if they did that, that's going to hurt so many other people. They have kids they have to think about. And so there's all these restrictions placed on this generation where they couldn't be their authentic self. And I really sat with that energy and thought about how aggravating it must be to know who I am on the inside and to have these beliefs and not be able to stand up because I feel helpless if I did. I feel like I couldn't face the mountain on my own, that I'm just one person. I'm David, they're Goliath. They're bigger than me, what's the use in standing up for what I believe in? And so I feel like this Pluto and Libra generation, they just had all this simmering going on and all this blood boiling, but they couldn't express it because, that wasn't the thing to do. It wasn't a part of the plan. And so you get this Pluto and Scorpio generation born, with all of this rage being built up from the previous generations, because there was such this standard that they had to live to that they couldn't do. Like, you know, the Libra working a 9-to-5 job every single day and paying the bills every single day. And it's just like, what is this getting me? I'm not feeling fulfilled. And the Pluto and Scorpio generation comes in and they feel the effects of all of this rage. And this is to not make light of the other generation's abuse, because very possible that someone in the Pluto and any generation actually, but you know, I'm just using Pluto and Virgo as an example. You know, people can put fear in other people to be perfect. Just look at Joe Jackson and Michael Jackson. He wanted his children to perform so perfect that he would beat them if they didn't, and he would make them practice and do things over and over and over so they would get better out of fear. They did it out of fear. They enjoyed it, I'm sure, but at some point it becomes unenjoyable because you're doing it out of fear. And that's kind of how that generation worked, you know? They were doing stuff out of fear. So I'm not making light of any other past generations' abuse, but what a lot of people that have the energy of Pluto and Scorpio have experienced is abuse. Whether that is emotional abuse growing up, physical abuse, sexual abuse, can manifest in a lot of different ways. And another thing is the Pluto and Scorpio generation is very used to having the rug pulled out from underneath them. Just when they think that they can have a little safety and security, it's pulled right out from underneath them. Look at how Social Security might run out for that generation. They don't have that safety net that a lot of other people do. It's hard to save for retirement because the housing has gone up so much. Your money is being used other places that you don't have the same access to save like the other generations. The safety of your future is at jeopardy. And as children, a lot of Pluto and Scorpio generation had to deal with neglect because their parents were busy dealing with other things that were happening in life. They were dealing with trying to meet the demands of the world, and they got neglected. And this, transformed them in a lot of ways, and they are able to transform the world because of this. And so they realize, this generation, that these children not having voices. One thing I've definitely noticed with Pluto and Scorpio is that they're more understanding with their children and seeing that they have a point of view, and seeing this is, over the long run, when they become evolved, they can really see why things happen the way that they happen, and they can take themselves out of the situation. Like, one example, I watched 90 Day Fiance, and on this show, there's this guy named Brendan, and he's young. I don't know how old he is. He's really young, maybe 19, 20, something like that. And he falls in love with this girl named Mary in the Philippines. And, it's like total young love. As an adult, as an almost 40-year-old, you can tell it's just like young love, when you just loved each other and you were obsessed with one another and you were each other's world and you had time to do those kinds of things, But he ends up deciding that he is going to move over to the Philippines, and they're going to start a family together, have a house, everything's going to be great. And so his mom comes over eventually for the wedding. Now, she is a past drug user. There was a lot of childhood trauma inflicted on Brendan because she was gone, she was away. And one thing I will say is, she had to go through a lot of stuff, but eventually in the show, Brendan and Mary have issues, and she was able to listen to them. She was able to give some really good advice and wisdom, and she was able to bring everybody together. When Brendan and Mary thought everybody was going to be separated, they thought she was going to hate them, that she wasn't going to support them. But because of all the trauma she had been through and everything that she was able to transform, she knew exactly what to tell her son. And as the Pluto and Scorpio generation ages, they are some of the greatest sources of wisdom because they have gone through quite traumatic things in life. Now, the way that I think that we have failed the Pluto and Sagittarius generation is, they are a wonderfully curious generation, and they want to be connected with the world. Sagittarius loves traveling and seeing all cultures and experiencing all things. And the Pluto and Sagittarius generation had this wonderful opportunity of connecting online and getting all of their information that they need. It's at their fingertips. That is unlike anything that had ever been before, because even as when I was a child, owning an encyclopedia set was a big deal. And you had to go to the library if you wanted to write any type of paper and get any type of research. It was all in books. And this generation, everything's on computer. But I think we failed them in some ways, because writing was a class you took. Computers was a class you took, and you could communicate through writing, through computers. It was balanced. But now it's we have allowed computers to just overtake everything that we do, which I understand humans take the path of least resistance. We're going to do what's easier. It's easier to put everything on a computer. The computer files it for you. You don't have to use your own file system anymore. The computer keeps up with everything. Nothing can get lost. We don't lose documents anymore. We don't have to write things down anymore. You can type it on the computer and send it to the masses, and everybody has the exact same thing. It's a wonderful time saver, and it's a wonderful thing to make sure everybody gets the same information, and it's a great way to connect us. But also, that being said, we've let it overtake to where that generation, they don't have good handwriting, and it's not their fault. I'm not judging them. It's because our generation didn't teach them. We put everything on computers because it was easier. So instead of computers just being a class where that is one way we can communicate, there's all these other ways we can communicate as well. We don't have those kinds of things. It has radically changed everything. And so I think in some ways we should have protected our children, and each generation should have been protected in some way. But maybe to not, think about how many kids we push an iPad in front of these days to keep them entertained. Children are reliant on this technology for everything. My son doesn't even have a locker in high school anymore because he doesn't have books. He doesn't have anything besides a computer. And I was so shocked. My favorite time of the year when I was a kid was to go school supply shopping. And we don't even get to do that anymore because he doesn't need anything besides his Chromebook, which is fascinating to me. I remember actually studying my combination log so I wouldn't forget the numbers. I was so scared I was going to forget the numbers and not be able to get my books. And that has just totally radically changed. And so my point is that I thought at one point my generation had it the hardest, and it was the generation that had to struggle the worst, and nobody had it like we had it. No one understood because we were caught in the middle. But what I found is that each generation has that same mindset. They were failed by the generation before them, and that they weren't protected in some way. And so they've had to transform from that, and they've had to rebel against what they knew and change from that. So actually, we're all connected. We've all been through the struggle of having to become something authentic to who we were not raised to be. And so I want us to remember, especially on this election day, as we all gather around and the whole world is watching. And you know why the world is watching? Because it affects them too. I want everybody to remember that our actions do affect others. We are the product of other people's actions, and we also leave a legacy with our actions. Just think about, what are the future generations going to say when they see your name on the family tree with maybe your picture or video? What are they going to say about you? We just need to know that we're all human, and we all go through these same things, and we are connected as one. We all go through all of that. So just be understanding and compassionate of those who have different views than you. It's okay if they have different views. They come from a different set of circumstances. They have viewed other things than you. They have experienced other things. Their outside environment may have been different than the environment that you were raised in. You know, it's really hard for someone with the Pluto and Sagittarius generation mindset to even think about having to struggle to keep their food cold in their house. You know, they don't even think like the Pluto and maybe Leo generation or Pluto and Cancer generation where they had to have ice boxes, you know, and like you can't always relate directly to the other generations because you didn't have to go through the same struggles that they had to. It's a different set of struggles each generation. But that doesn't mean that one generation struggled more than the other. So it's just a time to unite under all of these circumstances that we're going into. And I would love to hear your opinion on all of this and your perspective. I want to open up the discussion with things. If you are a part of these generations, you know, if your Pluto was in Libra, how were you able to become your authentic self? If your Pluto was in Virgo, how did you get over that expectation of perfection? You know, some people never get over it because it's their greatest struggle of their life to get past what their whole entire environment taught them to be. But the point is that we've all had to go through our own struggles, our own internal conflicts. We've all gone through things. Whether that is we've had to have this sense of perfection that we couldn't live up to, or maybe we needed to find our voice and be our authentic selves and we weren't allowed to because of the generation before us. Whatever it is, we've all had to take our hero's journey to become who we are today and to transform. And it has not been a light journey for anyone. It is not easy to go from the entire environment that you know, that you were raised in, that everybody accepted, and to radically change into someone that is the exact opposite. It is never easy to take that trip. And so I just want to remind people today that kindness goes a long way. You know, we really all are humans and we all are connected and we're all on this earth trying our best to survive and trying our best to love and trying our best to make the world a better place. And it's not always easy. And we may have different viewpoints at the end of the day, but there's no sense in personally attacking other people because you do not understand the circumstances that they come from unless you actually experienced it day by day. We can't, you know, as a Pluto and Scorpio, I can listen to the stories of the people from Pluto and Virgo and I can sympathize in a lot of ways, but that was not my day-to-day life. I had a totally different set of circumstances. However, I still struggled with the previous generation failing me, just like the Pluto and Virgo generation did, just like the Pluto and Leo, even though in the Pluto and Sagittarius, all generations have had to come up and rise up and change things that failed before them. And so I want to invite everybody to remember that we're all in this together. The whole world is affected by all of our choices. Our choices are important. They add up over time. They compound into where you have this whole generation with those sets of dynamics. And whatever we choose for the future, let's at least be aware that we are affecting the legacy. Just think about what people are going to say. What kind of legacy are you going to leave when people get in the future and your future grandkids and great grandkids get on that family research site and see your name with maybe your picture there? What are the other generations going to say about you and what you accomplished while you were here? I invite everybody to focus on what they can do in this world to change. We were all brought here with a wonderful gift to serve humanity with. I invite those who cannot stop spewing the hate and the misunderstanding to use that energy in a more positive way, to work on something that you're passionate about, that you can teach others to do. Don't use your energy to hate on those that don't have the same perspective as you, because truly they cannot understand your perspective because they haven't walked in your shoes. Just like you can't fully understand their perspective because of the same thing. Just realize that your energy can be used in a lot better way. Maybe you're creative with something. You do something that you can teach the world how to do. And I invite you to use that energy in that way. Anyways, Americans and the rest of the world, much love sent out to you. Thank you for watching my video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next one. Mwah.